Here is one of a series of talks by spiritual leader Lola McDowell Lee, spanning 2 decades from the early 70s through the 90s. Lola was a Zen Roshi, whose Rinzai lineage included Dr. Henry Platov and renowned Zen master Shigetsu Sasaki. Lola was a religious scholar as well as an ordained Christian minister. While the talks are focused mainly on Zen and Buddhism, Lola drew on many spiritual traditions, including those of Jesus, Plato, Lao Tzu, the Hindu Vedas, Meister Eckhart, and Gurdjieff.
And I am continuing with this Dhammapada. In which, now this, you all remember what the word means and where it came from and all those things, the history of it that we went into, because I can't repeat that every time. I would just be repeating that every time. Anyway, we come to this now where it says, the fool is careless, but the master guards his watching. It is his most precious treasure. He never gives in to desire. He meditates. And in the strength of his resolve, he discovers true happiness. He overcomes desire, and from the tower of wisdom, he looks down with dispassion upon the sorrowing crowd. From the mountain top, he looks down on those who live close to the ground. Mindful among the mindless, awake while others dream, swift as a racehorse, he outstrips the field. By watching, Indra became king of the gods. How wonderful it is to watch. How foolish it is to sleep. The bhikshu, now that's a monk, the bhikshu who guards his mind and fears the waywardness of his thoughts, burns through every bond with the fire of his vigilance. The bhikshu who guards his mind and fears his own confusion cannot fail. He has found the way to peace. Well, I guess that's one thing that could be said for living in a monastery as a monk. You know, you are so constantly in the environment, that it is a little easier to practice mindfulness and to watch. Of course, they're watching the same things as we're watching out here. You know, they've got their emotions to deal with just as much. But anyway, and we know that man, generic man, you know, man and women, man is the only creature on this planet who has the ability to choose. The birds and the animals and the insects and the plants and all what we find out there, they have no choice. They don't have mind with which to choose, for one thing. They're so encompassed in their state, in nature, you know, that their lives are what we could call predetermined. Nature takes care of them. Of course, nature takes care of us, too. You know, the body keeps functioning. You don't have to tell the heart, you know, now beat. You don't have to get up every morning and say, now breathe, the heartbeat, and stomach, you know, and I digest your food and all that. It's all taken care of for us, every bit of it, you know. But other than that, we've got a choice. The choice is limited by our abilities, but we can choose to go against nature, and we very often do. We choose. And we must also keep in mind that man is not born a being, not yet a being, not in the true sense. He is a becoming. He's on the way, to be sure. Every human being is on the way. But it is still a becoming. We are becoming sad, and we are becoming happy, and we are becoming first a child, and then we're becoming a teenager, and then we're becoming an adult, and then we're becoming mature, and then we're becoming old, or along that line. Always we're becoming something. You can, if you watch, you can count how many times a day you move. So you become something else. You have a different attitude. You see things in a different light. And you can switch, like that, from this point to this point. And we don't seem to find that odd, And so man is in his way searching, and he's seeking, and he's groping. And this is called, in some areas, faith without an object. This is the search, the searching. Faith without an object. There is something somewhere. There is something greater than I am. Searching. And we keep with this question, philosophy, old-time philosophy had it, who are you? And I keep drumming at it, who are you? Difficult for man to know who he is because he is not yet the being he is supposed to be. But he can certainly perceive whatever state he is, who he is. He can perceive something about that state. Being has to happen in here somewhere. And the being comes about through the searching and the seeking and the groping. And also through a choice. We have the ability to make a conscious choice, to have an awareness of the choices that we make. But how often do we do that? And this seems to be easy, so I'll go this way. To make a choice in awareness of what it is that you are doing. And it was Jean-Paul Sartre, I think it was, who said that man is a project. He creates himself by his own effort. He is born as an opportunity. He is born as a possibility. And he must become actual. And of course, it is within the realm of possibility that he misses. He misses the mark. Millions of people have missed, and some never find. Of course, they probably never did anything about it either. Some do find, because they made a choice. This is what they wanted to do. See? And then out of that finding, then beingness is the state. And they can say, I am awake. The many that miss the mark. Maybe only because they don't choose, or they choose an incorrect way. Many of them are just sit down and wait. They just wait. You know? They just have this hope that somewhere in here something's going to happen and it's going to change them. And not much ever really happens that way. You know, why should it? You know, if we can't make any effort to further ourselves, well, then this hope, you know, that something, maybe like a great light descending or whatever it is that people dream up about things, you know, how can it happen? Or maybe the great light descends, but it's also an hallucination. Yeah. We create a context within ourselves for a transformation, for a waking up. We create the space in ourselves for something valuable and something viable, you know, lots of life, for there's something essential which is going to happen. And we're not free in the sense that if you don't choose, you will be allowed not to choose, you know, because simply not choosing is a choice. The whole point of choosing something, you know, is to be able to make an aware choice, a choice in awareness, not just, oh yeah, I guess I'll do this or I guess I'll do that, just willy-nilly. And then you don't do it out of a desire, and you don't make the choice out of loneliness or because somebody else wants you to. You choose your life. That's what it's all about. And you're doing it all the time, every minute of the day. So, but let's make the choice with some awareness. You choose your life. Yeah. And now, in this world in which we find ourselves, there are many schools of thought. One of which is that man believes that we are born as an essence, and it's called the essential school. That is, man is born ready-made. He's all ready, so to speak. And the other school is that of existentialism. And they believe that man is born as an existence. So we got two things here now. First, the essence is, you bring it with you when you arrive, and you carry it all of your life. And the only job you have to do is to do something so that it will unfold. Because it is, now as it is, the essence is in a seed. And in this seed is, in the tree, seed, an acorn, is the oak tree. It is in the essence. And now in the essence of a human being is this one body. We have to unfold. You don't have to create yourself. You already are. Now, to be born as an existence, the other side of the fence, even the essence has to be created. It is not already present. Both ways, both of these schools, you have to find the ways and the means to be. You have to become a womb to your own being. This body is a womb for a being. You have to give birth to yourself, as it were, which is very poorly put. Physical birth is not the true birth, it's the first birth. So out of the first birth, you have to be born again. So these two, out of many, these two schools of thought. And I bring it up only because I want to ask you, which way does the wind blow for you? If you have to choose between these schools of thought, which one would you choose? And why? And if you choose neither, then what? And why? You know, this is how we come little by little to look at what we think. And this is very essential. And it is to look at the choices that we make. When the Buddha began his teaching pilgrimage after he had sat under the tree and had arrived at this state and of being awake, becoming the Buddha, and he went through the temptations of Mara, which is like Jesus going through the temptations of Satan, you know. And he went to the deer park near Benares, from the little place where he was sitting. And the people began to gather around him because his face was so radiant. And they asked him, you know, are you a god? And he'd say, no. Are you an angel? No. No. Well, what are you then? And he smiled and he said, I'm awake. Yeah. Simple answers put by these people, you know, when they asked Jesus who he was. You know, he said, I am. This one says, I'm awake. Yeah. And the 5 disciples who left him, you know, when he became so emaciated that he couldn't keep on with his meditation and everything, they were there, and they saw him. And they decided that they would keep their distance, and they wouldn't shun him, but they weren't going to give him any special attention either. But somehow they kept getting closer and closer to him because they wanted to see this. You know, you see somebody like that who's that radiant, you want to get close to him, and so they, like a magnet draws, you know, they're drawn. And the next thing you know. You know, they're going up for a better look at this, what happened to this man, because the last time they saw him, he was at death's door. And here he is, you know. And they found, all of a sudden, to their surprise, that they were preparing a place for him. And then they sat at his feet. Here's these same 5. So they said to him, please teach us what you have found. And so it was to these 5 students, these 5 disciples, who had at one time deserted him, now come back. That's where he began his work. And he began by teaching the Dharma, the path that leads finally to the end of sorrow. So, and his teaching to these 5 went like this. The first truth is the fact of suffering, anguish. All of us want happiness. All of us want what is good, what is pleasant, what is right, what is permanent, what is joyful, what is harmonious and satisfying and puts us at ease. And yet we all find that life usually brings the opposite. It brings frustration, dissatisfaction, incompleteness, suffering, and sorrow. Because life is change. And change can never satisfy desire. Therefore, everything that changes brings suffering. It is so easy to see this. I mean, if we see something that we like, that we think is compatible with us, or to us, or anything along that line, we immediately think we have to possess it. We should own this. It should be in our lives all the time. We can't just say, oh yeah, I like it now, and so I'll like it again. But no, we have to make something permanent out of it, and because we cannot make something permanent out of it, it's sorrow. We have anguish. Oh, look what I lost. I didn't lose anything, you know? The second truth is the cause of suffering. It isn't life that brings so much sorrow. It is the demands that we make on life. The cause of sorrow is selfish desire. There's a kind of a thirst in us, you know, to have what we want and to get our own way. And so thinking that life, just by we're here living, you know, we're supposed to be happy just because we're here. You know, where this fallacy came from, I'll never know, but it's here. And I'm living, so I'm supposed to have what I want. You know. And so people are running all the time after their desires. They never stand still. They just run. And all they get is unhappiness. Because this kind of selfishness only brings sorrow. And they say, you know, there's no fire like a selfish desire. And not 100 years of experience can really extinguish it. For the more you feed it, the more it burns. And we can see it in the eyes of people, you know, burning with desire. Yeah. What we want, you know, it's very simple. It's something that experience simply can't give us. We want permanent pleasure, unmixed, totally unmixed. Permanent pleasure, unmixed with anything unpleasant. Always the pleasant. And there is no end, you know, to such kind of wanting, because this is the nature of the ego. Suffering because life isn't satisfying, you know, our every selfish desire. And this is really like suffering because a banana tree doesn't bear mangoes. Yeah, silly, isn't it? Now the third truth, and you know, Buddha, in his teaching as a teacher, was called the great physician, the great healer, the physician. The third truth, any ailment that can be understood can be cured. And suffering that has a cause also has an end. When this fire of selfishness has been extinguished, when the mind is free of all our selfish desires, what remains then is a state of wakefulness. It's a state of joy. And it is called, you know, that which has been extinguished, that state where the desires have been extinguished, that which has been extinguished. And the name of that, of course, is nirvana. Yeah. The fourth truth is that selfishness can be extinguished by following the eightfold path, which is the right understanding or correct understanding, the right purpose, you can put correct in here and any correct purpose, right speech, right conduct, right occupation, right effort, right attention, and right meditation. See, so they speak, of Dharma as the wheel. The Dharma of your life is this wheel going around. And the spokes then are this eightfold path where you find yourself in the Dharma. So that the right understanding begins with seeing life as it is. In the midst of all the change, this wheel is going around all the time. And in the midst of that, and the midst of all of your activities, do you see a place where you can firmly stand? Firmly stand in all the changes that takes place. Where do you stand firm? Where on this wheel is there really anything that you can hang on to, that you can hold? And to understand that happiness doesn't come from out there. I am the cause of my own unhappiness. If I just stop causing myself unhappiness, I'll be happy. To understand that. And to understand also that all things that come into existence pass away again. And that's right understanding. And that is the beginning of wisdom. Now, right purpose or correct purpose follows from right understanding. So that the thinking, falls in line with life as it is. And they say, as a flood sweeps over a slumbering village, so death sweeps away those who are not prepared. Well, you know that every 10 days or so there's something that comes by that sweeps away, if you're not prepared, the ground on which you stand. So one begins to have a purpose of ordering one's life in learning how to live. And that's right purpose. It's a very poor way. Learning. Understanding. That's the purpose. To live so that one can understand. Now, the right speech and the right action and the right occupation, they all follow this, which is, this consists of living in harmony with oneself and with others, living in harmony in a unity of life. It is speaking kindly. It is acting kindly. It is living not just for yourself, but for the welfare of all. It's easy to live for oneself. Just get out of my way and let me have mine. And it is somewhat easy to live for one's family, one's friends and dear ones and so on. But living for the good of all, that's difficult. It takes some doing, because it is always putting somebody else's feelings ahead of yours. And this is something we don't like to do. But, if you read the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, you will see the same thing in there. Now, as far as right occupation or right livelihood are concerned, I read a little thing not too long ago by a man named Schumacher, and he presented 2 points of view as far as occupation is concerned, of right livelihood. And he says, the modern, that is today's, the modern economist has been brought up to consider labor or work as a little more than a necessary evil. From the point of view of the employer, It is, in any case, simply an item of cost, to be reduced to a minimum if it cannot be eliminated altogether, say by automation. So from the point of view of the workman, working or labor, is a disutility. To work is to make a sacrifice of one's leisure and one's comfort. And the wages are a kind of a compensation for that sacrifice. And you'd be surprised at the people that hold that attitude. Yeah, they go to work, and because I've got a job, they owe me. They've got to pay me my wages because I'm putting in my time, where I could be enjoying myself. Anyway, hence, the ideal from the point of view of the employer is to have output without employees. And the ideal from the point of view of the employee is to have income from unemployment. Yeah. Okay, that's one point of view, and it's quite prevalent. Then we come to the Buddha and his contrasting way of thinking. And in Buddhism, they take the function of work to be threefold. One, it gives a man a chance to use and develop his faculties. Where else are you going to develop them? Playing around? Sitting under a tree? No. You have an opportunity to use your talents, to develop your talents by doing as good a work as you possibly can. See? And it also helps him to overcome his ego-centeredness by joining with other people in a common task. They're working together, and so that everybody is the same together. And to help to bring forth goods and services that are needed for our becoming existence. Now, there's a great deal of difference between those two points of view. The first, that of the materialist, is very imprisoning. We don't have much latitude in there. And the second is simply a way of looking for liberation. Now, anyway, these spokes of the wheel, they sound very simple. And to some people, they're very boring. It's something that you drag them through. Who bothers to plumb the depths to see maybe what he really meant? A simple little thing in the precepts, or in the Ten Commandments, let's say. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Then why do you keep putting your head above God's? See, it's not just a matter of projecting out there that, somebody's got an idol or an icon there and they're worshiping that, so they've got somebody ahead of God. As the Zen say, why keep putting your head above God's? Thou shalt not kill. And yet we gossip all the time. We're killing reputations left and right. We're killing something in ourselves when we do it. So these 8 spokes, one can go over them and all the time see more and more and more. Because as we look around now, Who acts in accordance with them? Who keeps them in mind? Do you even keep them in mind? Even 1/10 of the time? All creatures in this world love life, all of them. And they all fear pain. And so we should treat them all as ourselves. Be kind, be considerate, and be courteous. Now, the last three spokes, they deal with the mind. See, our mind, on which so very much depends, because, they start out with this whole thing with, our life is shaped by our mind. So, if you don't like the shape of your life, you look to your mind. See, our mind is conditioned, and it is so conditioned, we see nothing wrong with the way we think. No, we can't. And we see nothing wrong with what we do, and therefore what we say, and so on. But just watch what's going on. Do not be deceived. Just watch what is going on with you. Be watchful. Right effort is an endeavor. This is this trying to train oneself in thought. So therefore in word and in action. A gymnast trains the body day in and day out, 8 hours a day. They train and train, and that body is like this, like an instrument, Those who want to know, those who want to be aware, they train the mind. See, then one is mindful. This is what they mean by mindful. It is difficult, as Buddha said, to reach beyond the clutches of Mara. It is so easy to have a partnership with him. Let him have a little and I can have a little, and so on and so on. But he says, don't do that. He says, be vigilant. Be vigilant among those who slumber. Right attention follows from right effort, keeping the mind where it should be. The wise, he says, train the mind to give complete attention to one thing at a time, to what one is doing, what one is about, here now. You give that complete attention. The mind which wants to go where it likes and do what it likes, it is this unruly mind that suffers, and it causes suffering. See, those who want to follow the Dharma should always be mindful. See, that is attentive, always attentive. And then, of course, we come to this right meditation. Because that's the means of training the mind. And as they said, as rain seeps through an ill-thatched hut, selfish passion seeps through an untrained mind. So train your mind to be attentive through your meditation. And now I put before you another point of view, and this is by a Rabbi Dressler. He's a Kabbalist, I am given to understand. He says, man's continued existence is by no means guaranteed. There is no stability or certainty to man's existence. And one keeps oneself on one's toes if has this sort of in the back of one's mind, because this is true. You don't know how long you're going to exist here. However, he goes on, because he's gathering things out of the Old Testament, and he says, the angels oppose the creation of man. The forces of truth and justice opposed the creation of man. The creation of man was opposed because the evil that would come forth from him was foreseen. The creation of man was opposed because man's power to hurt, he will destroy, and this was foreseen. Notwithstanding all this opposition, God created man. Now this is according to this rabbi. In the hope that the good would conquer the evil, that the power to love would conquer the power to hurt, and the will to obey. His will should conquer the will to destroy. The history of man, however, has been the history of God's disappointment with man. What the prophets feared most was God's abandonment of man, the silencing of his voice, and the withdrawal of his presence. Perhaps this is the meaning of our time. If man wants to destroy himself, God seems to say, let him. I've had enough. I shall try it again elsewhere. It's a very limiting picture, but it also shows how little we have considered others, how little we have loved others, how little we have put somebody before us. It's a very anthropomorphic picture, and it's a very dismal picture that God just gives up on us because we've made such a mess out of things. And at the same time, you see, how many men and women really try to study themselves, to be watchful of themselves, to become mindful. People are afraid of death. And you know, this fear of death that we have can be met with the wish to understand life and death. And that wish to understand can be so strong that it is the same strength as our fear of death. And that then is the bridge between man and immortality. The wish to understand. If you want to understand, you watch. You guard your thoughts. You watch. And there is a story in connection with this of Al-Hawaj. He was a 10th century sage. He was a Sufi. He lived in Persia. And he was sentenced to die for heresy. And they scourged him, and they mutilated him, and his skin was very slowly stripped from his body. Yeah. Then he was hung on a cross to wait for his death. That's historical fact. You see, I make it bad enough and I get your attention. This Al-Hawaj had a song that he sung, you know, and it was a song of his identity with God. And this is heretical to the Muslims. And then the story goes that, you know, he's hanging there on the cross on his last day. And his pupils, they come to see him. If he will say one last word of instruction. What would you expect him to say? Would you expect him to say, be faithful? Would he, like Jesus, give a command of forgiveness? Would he maybe describe a vision of God that he was having? What do you think would be his last words? You know, as he was dying, he said one thing to these his disciples. One thing. What do you think it was? Do you think it was a blessing? Do you think he said to them, peace be with you? Love be with you? What do you think he said? One thing, study yourself. It's something we hear from everywhere. You know, the oracle at Delphi, know thyself in true proportion. This one, study yourself. Yeah. Now, the Buddha's disciples, they came from many walks of life, just as Jesus' disciples came from many walks of life. Ananda and Devadatta, they were his cousins, and they left wealth and social position to be with him. Shariputra, the great scholar, and Madhyayana and Kashyapa, they, all three of them were scholars, great scholars, knew tremendous amounts already, came from other teachings and other teachers. Upali had been a barber in Kapilavastu, which is the same town where Buddha had lived. And Sona, he was also from a very wealthy family, but you know, he had become so enamored of the Buddha that he had one time he'd had great hopes of becoming a musician, really a musician, you know. And his heart, you know, was with this veena. It's kind of what they play in India. But anyway, he met the Buddha, and so he became a disciple, and he embraced the spiritual life. And I mean, he was out to swallow it, you know. He went into it hook, line, and sinker. He threw everything else away. Yeah, everything else was to be thrown overboard. So in the forests around there, where they had the camp, there were wild animals. There were lions, and there were tigers, and there were elephants, and also there were lots of poisonous snakes. So this little guy goes out into the forest every day to practice his meditation. He goes as deep as he can in the forest. And not only that, he insisted on going barefoot, which, you know, his pampered feet, you know, from his past, he had been a very pampered young man. You know, his feet rebelled, and they bled, and they got sore, and he was in a mess. But every day he went out there anyway, blisters on his feet from stumbling around. And after a time of this, one day the Buddha followed him, you know. And he carried with him, the Buddha did, as always, his begging bowl. He always carried the begging bowl with him. But he also had a veena. And he had loosened the strings on this instrument until they were limp like spaghetti, you know. So finally he gets to the place where Sona is. He sees Sona meditating under the banyan tree. And the boy sees him, and he limps over to him, and the Buddha didn't notice at all that he was limping, or it didn't seem to it anyway. And all he said to him was, Sona, can you show me how to make music with this? Yeah. And so Sona took the instrument, very respectfully, because, you know, this was his tremendous desire at one time. He fingered a few notes, and then he laughed, and he said, Blessed One, you can't produce music when the strings are so loose. Oh, I see, said the Buddha, you know. Let me try it again. And he proceeds to wind the strings so tight that Sona winced. You know, see? And then when the Buddha tested them, they produced nothing but high-pitched squeaks. You know. Blessed One, that won't work either. You'll break the strings. Here, let me tune it for you. You know. So he took the instrument, and he loosened the strings gently, and then he played a little of a very haunting melody. And then abruptly, he stopped and he gave the thing back to Buddha, because the melody was bringing back memories, and he didn't want to arouse these memories. He was so immersed in what he was going to do and to be that he wanted to trample everything else underfoot, even his ability to make music. And he gives the thing back to him. He says, Buddha, it has to be tuned just right to make music. Neither too tight nor too loose. It has to be just right. And the Buddha turns to him and says, Sona, it is the same for those who seek enlightenment. Don't let yourself be slack, but don't stretch yourself to a breaking point either. You choose the middle way. You choose the middle way between too much and too little. And this is the whole way of the Eightfold Path. Now, it was this, what he called the middle way, on which the Avatamsaka Sutra is based, and it is this on which Nagarjuna wrote, this man of this tremendous wisdom who went into this middle way. And so we do not stop with just choosing, I won't go too far this way and I won't go too far this way, I'm going to stay in the middle. That's very surface. There is a middle way. There is a middle way. Here, on this, where we find ourselves, we have this world of appearance. That's one aspect. Then we have another world, which we sometimes call an inner world, in which we perceive some things about ourselves, other states of consciousness. So, and people talk about having visions or whatever, of seeing states. Okay, so you've got states of consciousness on one side, and here is this world of appearance, these two aspects. Now there's a middle way. That's something else again. And this is Nagarjuna. Henry said, he was the greatest genius who ever lived. And there are, with this Avatamsaka Sutra, there are maybe 5, maybe 7 people in the whole world who really understand it. So that's what you're going after. That's what you're going after. Anyway, back to this Dhammapada. The fool is careless, but the master guards his watching. It is his most precious treasure. A fool remains a slave. He is a slave of his instincts, of his unconscious desires, of all kinds of whims that blow through. He's a slave of anything and everything that happens around him. And what happens around him, no matter what kind of an appearance it is, he just picks it up and tosses it in his little bag and carries on in his pack. You don't want to do that. A watchful man becomes the master of his life. He lives according to that light. And he has a simple, contented life, no matter what comes. Guarding the watching. the meditation. The meditation, some people say meditation is an escape mechanism. We shouldn't be doing it. That's kind of the view that some people have in this country. Meditation is something very new in the Western culture, actually. But a meditation is an escape from the unreal, from the delusions, from the deluded mind. It is an escape from desire, and it is an escape from our thoughts, and it is an escape from everything in us that creates our confusion, if you're sitting right. Yeah. Because it is simply moving into the mind so that one is mindful. Now, somehow in our everyday life we manage to keep ourselves together. We have here a semblance of togetherness. Right. This togetherness is a facade. It is something that, it's their face that we present to the world. And we keep, we're very busy all the time. We have to keep adjusting this facade, so that we can make it more appealing to the people, to others out there, so on. Now, we're very busy doing this. While we are so busy creating this facade and presenting it, what is going on behind it? What is this facade covering? Well, there are some people who think that this facade is covering a clamoring crowd. We have what we have acquired from our relatives, and the things we have read, and the things we have seen, all this what we see on television, and there are all these great contradictions, so that it's like a civil war going on within us. That some thoughts are fighting other thoughts, and thoughts want to be fulfilled, their desires, and they confuse us. And they look, there's a desire in us. It looks to you to fulfill the desire that's running around in here. It's looking to you to do something about it. See? No wonder people don't want to look. You do it my way. If you are somewhat aware of this confusion, all it takes is just to be aware of it. And you're no longer identified with it. Yeah. As soon as you are no longer identified and clutched to and clinging to this confusion, you're on your way home. See, make it sound very simple. And it really is, in its way. You're watching. And when you're watching, you're no longer aiding and abetting the confusion. So that very slowly you can withdraw your energies from all the strife. And the energies that are withdrawn go to feed the new man. The new man that is born of the old man, which is the way St. Paul puts it. So again and again and again and again, with a watchful mind, the wise man brings himself back to the present. See, back either from the future or from the past. He brings himself now. And always now, he brings himself back to it every moment that he possibly can. And slowly it begins to happen. Slowly a window opens. And suddenly you're touching life. There's the wind and the rain, and there's a leaf swirling, and there's the earth as a witness to it all. And so that life becomes not just a word. The word life represents something. And there is this very tangible quality. And love is not just a word. It is this tremendously overflowing energy. And a blessing then is no more just a hope of some grace. You are it. Because meditation is a state of non-asking, of non-questioning, of non-thinking. And in the Pali they call it samasin or samasati. And we call it samasamadhi. Right mindfulness, right awareness, consciousness, alertness, watchfulness, witnessing, all-encompassing. Consciousness is, with no content. See, the mind is empty, and it is a pure presence with nowhere to go. It is at home. So that is sama samadhi.
If you find Lola's talks valuable, more will be posted in weeks to come.